We're staying for a week in a little apartment in Wales. Tiny, tiny little kitchen. I don't know how much cooking we'll get done, but that's not a problem. Here's the view from our front door. Isn't that beautiful? This is the River Dee. We're in Llangollen. That's the town down there. But isn't that a beautiful thing to walk out onto? So just wandering about on these rocks in Llangollen where we're staying. These rocks tell a story. So most of this exposed rock here is slate or shale or some kind of sedimentary rocks, and it's been broken up and weathered by the action of the river and the frost and all these sorts of things. And most of this rock is really jagged and broken because it's just pieces of shale. It's quite a soft stone. It's been broken up and we see the exposed edges, but every now and again you get a rock like this that's really rounded. So this is a rock that's been tumbled probably in a waterfall further up river and eventually found its way downstream. So maybe there was a, maybe further up the River Dee there is a waterfall, and this rock might have spent a little while tumbling around at the foot of the waterfall, just getting all its sharp edges knocked off. I can see out there's another very much more rounded rock than all the others. And I think that's just I think that one might be a piece of sedimentary rock, but that one's probably been rolled down the river a bit and had all its sharp edges knocked off. We'll have a little look around because there's a few of these in here, and like I say, they all tell a story. So here's another one, and I think this one's probably been trapped in this little pocket here, and every time the river floods, that rock there gets moved around, tumbled around in this little thing, probably can't escape over this ledge here, and so this rock gets smoothed off, gets its corners knocked off, whereas all the other rocks are having little chunks break off all the time, leaving sharp edges. So again, in this little pocket here there's a little pond, and you can see that some of the rocks in here are just a bit smoother, a bit more rounded on the edges than the bedrock. Another one here, and again in one of these little ponds that's isolated from the river. There's this rock very much smoother than all of its counterparts, and of course this rock may be partly responsible for this pond being here. So as it's tumbling around, it's not just getting its corners knocked off, it's wearing away a depression in the bedrock. So yeah, down there another one, and so obviously different from the rocks surrounding it. I think that might be a piece of sandstone there, but again completely rounded off on all the corners and so different from the jagged bedrock. So we decided to have just a day out trip to Chester, so we're back in England. Chester's a lovely city to walk around, lots of really, really interesting architecture. So this is what they call the Rose, and you have to look for the shops you're after because they might be on the first floor.
Yeah.
What's kind of cool is that even when the buildings have been rebuilt in a more modern form, they've preserved the form factor of the medieval rose. So here we go, this is a piece of brutalist architecture from probably the 1970s, but they've preserved the continuity of the rose. Which one do you prefer, modern or ancient? So there's also the town square, a very, very impressive town hall. And this place is called Coachworks Arcade. I assume that used to be a Coachworks. So it's the Westminster Coach and Motor Car Works. So yeah, if you like all kinds of architecture, I suppose this is the place. And then opposite the town hall, there's the cathedral. It's just around the corner. Oh, well, I think this is part of it. So down here, I think we can get to the riverside, and it's the River Dee. So the whole of this week really has been all about the River Dee. That's the prevailing theme of this stay away from home. Public house to let now. Could be yours. So every now and again, you get little glimpses of the old city walls. We'll just have a look up here actually. So this here is the old city wall. Just a moment ago we walked through the main gate, through one of the gates of the city. But yeah, this is the old walls. Foundations of the southeast angle of the Roman fortress wall and internal tower built between AD 74 and 96. In front of the wall was a defensive ditch 9 feet deep and 20 feet wide, which is now filled in. So remains of a Roman fortification there, and again the old city walls and one of the main city gates. So that's the old, that's Wolf's Gate, but it's also known as Old Newgate. Yeah, I think that's Old Newgate, that's New Newgate, but also known as Wolf's Gate. So down that lane there is the River Dee, so we'll just pop down there and have a look. But you can see these walls. So this is layers of different walls. So up the top there, quite a modern wall. Underneath it, maybe Victorian, and then right down at the bottom, probably Roman. So here we are, the River Dee. So this is going to be quite a big and slow, placid river at this point, because we are quite close to the mouth of the River Dee, which is at Chester, or near Chester. But this is the same river, ultimately, that we are staying next to way over in Llangollen in Wales. But as you can see, the character of the river is quite different here. So we could hire a pedalo or a pleasure boat and go boating. Well, that doesn't look like it's open. It's not really the weather for it. There we go, the River Dee, and that looks like it could be, I reckon that bridge is Thomas Telford. I'm going to go and have a look, because that looks like the work of Thomas Telford. So here's the bridge. Let's see if we can find an information sign that tells us something about it. But it's wrought iron by the look of it, mostly. Right, I could be wrong about this. City of Chester, Queen's Park Bridge, 1923. That's a bit more modern than I thought it was. I suppose maybe the steel cables should have been the giveaway there. So there we go, the River Dee at Chester. The bridge is swaying ever so slightly. It's quite a strange thing. You can probably see it if I put the camera here. You can probably see the movement. Gotta say, some aspects of this bridge don't exactly fill me with confidence. Like the amount of rust here and the amount of material remaining. We're going to head back into the town now and get some lunch. So here, this is the remains of a Roman amphitheatre. So we can walk through here, and so I think we will. This is a representation of where the original walls were. These are replica walls here. There was quite a lot of ruin. I imagine probably when this place fell into decay after the decline of the Roman Empire, it's probable that a lot of the stones were looted to build other things. So what we've got here is what's remaining, what was below ground. So we're entering the arena. I wonder if this is where gladiators and performers would have entered. This little object over here. This is the altar to Nemesis, a replica. So the other half of the arena is underneath the ground over there, or destroyed, but it's quite an interesting trompe-l'oeil painting on the wall here that completes the panorama. Quite cleverly done, and also gives you an impression of what it might have been like when it was in its original condition. Lunch in the Pied Bull, which is only 500 years old.
Right, I'll put yours. Have like a skewer, and it's like yeah.
So I think that's probably about the end of this little video segment, and that's Chester. We've really only scratched the surface. There is just so much to see here. So much history, so much architecture, so many interesting things. The shops are almost an incidental detail to everything else. So one of the things I haven't really featured in any of the videos that came out of our Welsh holiday yet is this. This is Bara brith. It's a Welsh tea bread. It's a bit like a fruit cake, And this is the best one we had, actually. So we had this. We're back at home now. We brought this one back with us. We had several pieces of this in various different places. This is the best example I've tasted, or the one I liked the most. We bought this from a little deli in Market Street, and this, why don't you just show you? It's a moist, quite loose textured tea bread. Lots and lots of fruit in it, raisins and currants, spiced with, I think, cloves and nutmeg and cinnamon, maybe a bit of ginger. So it's often called a tea bread, and some of the things in the category that have names tea this or that, tea cakes for example, don't always have tea in them. This does. I think the fruit might be soaked in strong tea, and you can taste the tea. And it's very good. It's different from a fruit cake in that it is kind of a little bit more bready than a fruit cake. It's also quite different from, for example, bread pudding, which might look similar. So this isn't made from bread. This is a recipe that's made from flour and other ingredients. I may have a go at making this in a future video. Obviously, we're not in Wales, and I don't have a kind of a family connection there. So I don't have a family recipe to share with you. I really rather doubt I'll be able to make it as good as this example. So if you do find yourself in Llangollen and you want to try the Bara brith I thought was the best, it's from the little foodie shop in Market Street. Not sponsored, just a fan. Okay, who remembers this thing? This is outdoor lantern that I customised a few years ago. So when we bought this just had plain clear glass in it, and I made a stained glass lantern out of sea glass. This was back at the old house, and we didn't fix this up on the wall because at that time we knew we were going to move house. So I kept this, and now we're in a place where it might fit on the wall, but first I want to just test it because I want to actually offer it up on the wall and make sure that it gives us enough light for the spot where we want to put it. So yeah, here on the end of this extension of the house, we've got this rather utilitarian bulkhead lamp on there. I would like to replace that with this thing, and I think we put it just like there or something, but I want to just make sure it produces enough light to illuminate the path down here from this placement. This thing's not pretty, but it's quite bright. So what I'm going to do is just temporarily wire this up to a flex, plug it in this evening after dark, and then we'll just see if it lights the place up enough. So I figured the best way to do that was, well, we happen to be throwing away another appliance, and I cut the cord off of it, making this incredibly dangerous thing here where you can plug that into the mains and you've got exposed conductors at the end there. So anyway, that aside, let us take this apart and get it wired up. Are there little blanking caps? I thought there might have been little black blanking caps for this, but maybe not. I suppose I can always squeeze a bit of black silicone in there. Right, they're not captive screws. Okay, good to know. So that's the bit that fixes on the wall. There is a cable gland here. So the cable goes through that grommet. I won't actually cut that out for now. I'll save that for when we do actually put the thing in there. And then this has to be wired into this rather fiddly little terminal block here at the bottom and the earth connector. Right, so strip this cable back. Okay, so I could take that off of the back plate here to wire that up, but I don't think I need to. Probably should have cut more slack on this, but never mind. So live is brown. Wow, that is kind of fiddly. Neutral is blue. You know, I really should have just taken this thing off the back plate. It would just be so much easier. Okay. And then earth, I think I might need to strip a little bit more off of it because it's got to wrap around a terminal. Right. Now it doesn't exactly fill me with confidence that this terminal for the earth here is rusted away like this, so I may replace that with a bit of copper and a stainless screw or something like that when we fit this to the wall. Yeah, I think this is a kind of galvanic thing going on here where we've got a steel screw and an aluminium plate, and the steel is rusting preferentially. Anyway, it'll do for now. So I just need to hook that around there for now. It'll do for the purposes of this test. That goes through there like that, and then that goes into there like that. Yeah, that's why you need the grommet there, because obviously that's going to pull out, but this is not the final config. Anyway, so now I want those two mounting screws back. And we fix the light fitting in place. I think this is more fiddly than actually it's going to be to wire it permanently. This lamp goes in there. This is a 7.8 watt LED lamp. I don't know what the equivalent of this is in... It doesn't actually have the kind of... it doesn't seem to have the tungsten equivalent wattage, which is interesting. For a long time, LED lamps used to say this is equivalent to a 60 watt or a 100 watt or whatever. This is, I think, the first time I've seen one of these where it didn't do that. So that's the lamp in place, and then we put the housing back on. There is a gasket inside of here, so that keeps all the moisture out. Turn it backwards until we hear a click, and then we know we're in the right thread, we're not cross-threading. Right, so that's just wired up to a flex, not particularly securely, but good enough for a quick test. So I can just offer it up to the wall this evening after dark, plug it in, and we can see whether it properly illuminates the path. Now we've got this wired up, we can do a little daylight test. Not the most even lighting down the bottom here, but I think that's just inevitable. Anyway, now we've just got to wait for dark so that we can fix this up and see whether it's light enough to illuminate the path. We could go brighter on the lamp. So here we are, it's fitted in place now. And so what I had to do here actually was, I didn't record any of this. The existing lamp was on quite a short piece of cable. And so, and unfortunately, up above the ceiling there, you can't get in there. It goes up and over the wall above the ceiling in the utility room here. And without actually taking a piece of ceiling down, there was no way to extend that wire internally. So I chased out a channel in the render and brickwork here and fed that down to a little, well, a larger cavity that I chased out, and I've put a little junction box in there. A waterproof junction box. I've left the top of that junction box exposed in case somebody wants to do maintenance, wants to rewire it at some point in the future. And then I cut a channel down the wall. There was already a mark here from where there used to be a hanging basket bracket like this one. So I chased a channel down the wall to about here, put in a piece of armoured cable and brought it out just behind where the lamp is fitted. And so the lamp's gone on the wall now. So that's what it looks like in situ. I don't think that's too bad. and we'll have a look and see what that looks like at night time. And here's what it looks like at night. So here it is at dusk, and you may have noticed the rooks are back. The rooks are back from their holidays. So here it is at dusk. Obviously that's not when we typically use it, but that's the best time to record it using the camera equipment available to me. It works really well, and actually being a little bit lower down, it's not underneath that little roof ledge there. It was actually, the old light was tucked up underneath that fascia, and as a result it couldn't cast light all the way down the path. This one does. Obviously you can't see that at the moment because it's not completely dark yet, but you get the idea. Anyway, works really well, really happy with it. I think it fits really nicely with the setting, so happy ending. And I meant to mention, in case you noticed that hole in the soffit up there, I am going to fill that in before a wasp goes in there and decides to build a nest. So I spoke before about this Tayberry plant. This is the one that's really fruited very well this year, and we need to cut out all of this fruited wood because this plant fruits on the second year wood. So this is now second year wood. This is all fruited. You can see this looks quite spent, and it won't fruit very much on this wood next year. This is the current year wood. This shoot has grown this year. Here's another one. Here's Here's another one, and another one here. So what we need to do is cut out all the old wood and train in the new. The plant is actually rooted down here. This is where it's sprouting from. So we've got to be careful we don't cut back and cut into the wrong piece. But what we're going to do is actually start at the wrong end and cut it all the way back, just piece at a time. So rather than trying to cut out great pieces and pull them out, we'll just cut it into small pieces and put it straight in the compost. So we are just going to unwire it from the fence here. I'm trying to do this with one hand because I'm talking on the camera, but anyway, that'll come undone. And then Jenny's going to just cut it into sections so that we don't end up stabbing ourselves or catching ourselves with great long pieces. It's easier just to cut it into little sections. Now in theory, if we took these sections and buried them, they would probably root. If I can just show you this one here, this is one of the new shoots we're going to tie in, but it had arched over and touched the ground, and where it's touched the ground it's produced roots, so it would produce a new plant from there. And so these could be just treated as hardwood cuttings. Right, so that might actually look quite brutal. We've cut back all of the fruited wood, and what we've got now is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of this year's stems. And so now we've got to train these in along the fence here. All right, so there we go. So that's all the new wood trained in approximately the right direction. And now it's just a case of finding the right place for it on the fence. That may look really brutal, and it might look like we've lost the whole plant, but that is all the new wood tied into the fence. I've made these kind of loops so the berries will be up here as well as lower down. That's the wood that's going to fruit next spring and summer. And then what will happen next year is when these have fruited, more stems will come up from the base here, more new stems. We'll just drain them up across the garage roof to hold them, and then prune these out when they fruited next year. So we are at the Dorset County Show, which, judging by the scale of the parking here, is a bigger event than the spring show, because this is phenomenal. It's in a different place to the spring show as well. Actually, this is nearer to Dorchester. But my goodness, that's quite a lot of cars. And that was only the half of it. That's quite phenomenal. First order of the day, since we are here at just after lunchtime and we haven't had lunch. So yeah, significantly bigger event than the spring show. Still trying to figure out what everything is and where everything is, but we'll get to it in a minute. I'll show you. I think we'll try and find the exhibition tent and have a look at people's show vegetables and whatnot.
Hello, boy. You all right? Good lad. Here he is.
What I'm really looking for is Burford Browns.
So what?
Right, if we go like that, once again, Mr. Allen line. So, 3 morning, the streets will be actually like the landing page of the website or Instagram post saying, hello, this is our street, and there's a station, this is us along, we'll straight to the street, look at those heads, they're all mapped, the wall mapping, spot on, straight through behind them, so the coastal taking seconds, like my rail crew always very nice tapping, so the 7th or the final end at the end, that takes to do it, get that tree to back up in the market. So well done. I think it's time to get them off the here with a bit more condition on them. The race. So make sure that's the great too. And good luck to all those in the bring good luck tomorrow. So very much. The street and our lovely couch. Standing in reserve, into pruning, strongly down out of hot pollen and continentals. Yeah, what the Dorset down 2025. Yeah.
Okay, so honest opinion, Dorset County Show. I don't want to be negative, but it's huge, it's incredibly busy. It's actually quite difficult to see some of the exhibits because of the sheer volume of people queuing to see them. It's not a complaint. It's obviously a popular show, and that's a good thing. But for example, the pigs tent, we just couldn't even get in there because there's just a queue of people shuffling to get to the entrance. It just wasn't worth queuing up to go into a hot tent full of pigs. Let's go and have a look at some goats, shall we? And in case you're wondering where is Eva, she's at home because most of the livestock tents don't allow dogs in. Is that tasty? Okay, horticultural and floral pavilion over there, and home crafts over there, so we're going to have a look at that, definitely. I don't know if you heard that, somebody's not enjoying their day. So there are, in horticultural shows like this, there are classes of events, so you have to go and, so this one looks like it's a single leaf of a hosta, and first is this one here. So not awarded to the biggest or the brightest, but the one that the judges felt was the most beautiful specimen, I suppose. Class 328, floating flower heads. First place to this bowl of asters here.
Just flat in the
Cacti and succulents. Onions. So the vegetable categories in particular are quite interesting, I think, because these are judged not necessarily on their size or beauty, but often on their uniformity. The standards for each category are usually quite well defined. So if you're going to exhibit in the show, and I'm not sure whether I ever will, but if you're going to exhibit in the show, there are specifics for how you do it. So it's always like 6 tomatoes or 5 tomatoes on a plate, or 3 pears or something like that. And often they're looking for uniformity as well as the actual representation of the type. So for example here, so these are squashes of some sort, and that's won first prize, and probably because they are a lovely uniform set. So rhubarb here, and I'm kind of going to blow my own trumpet here, but my rhubarb was better than any of these this year, but I'm obviously not taking part in the show. Some classes, of course, the prize does go to the biggest one, and there we go. So that's the biggest pumpkin in show this year. Yes, there are classes again for the heaviest onion, for example. That one's heavier. Hang on. These must be exactly the same weight. 2 onions. What's the chances of that? Or the longest runner bean. And this one is first prize. So this one's probably going to be trio of onions. 3 onions, yeah, there we go. So again, what the judges are looking for here is uniformity and perfection of form, rather than just, you know, you could have 3 perfect onions of different sizes, but you wouldn't win this. What you have to do here is get 3 onions that are of uniform size and appearance, but also very good examples. 5 onions. 3 onions. No category for onion. And again here, for this, these are runner beans. So look at the uniformity of those runner beans, the perfection of size, and it's not easy to do that actually when you grow runner beans. There are all sorts of things people have to do to get runner beans to do this. They might have put them in cardboard tubes or something like that to actually make them grow straight. You can see one of them snapped here because the judges have snapped them and tested them to make sure that they're not stringy or, you know, what they're like inside as well. And carrots around it. I'd be disappointed if there is not a category for girthiest carrot, but it doesn't look like there is. Although this carrot here is both girthy and long, hence the size.
That's very large.
So Homecraft in this marquee, which is going to have jams and jellies. Now in my jam making video I talked about show standards for jams and jellies and conserves and seedless jam and so on. So we're going to see some of that here. So a bottle of farmhouse cider, half bottle of liqueur. So looking at the jams here that I've won, so nectarine and apricot jam, beautiful colour. Courgette jam over there. Category jar of any other jam. Marmalade, so first prize there for, now what they will have been looking for here in this one is transparent marmalade with suspended shreds of orange, and that's a really good example. Beautiful colour, some clarity in there, but thin shreds of orange peel suspended throughout, not all floated up to the top or sunk to the bottom, so you can see why that one might have won first prize. Jar of fruit jelly. Now I happen to know what they're looking for here in the show standards is clarity and set, so it needs to be not too firmly set, not too and obviously doesn't need to be syrup, it has to be jellified. So this one's won second prize here. If you look at that, it's a lovely clear jelly, crabapple jelly. This is first prize here, slow jelly. But yeah, the show standard for jelly is a delicate jellified set and as clear as possible. So the cakes again, and I'm very sure, looking at these Dundee cakes, they're all lovely cakes, but look how carefully the almonds have been arranged on the top of this one. I'm sure that that was a factor in the judging. So how about if I built something like this in the little bit of woodland we've got for my basket making, sit out on the deck here, not with the trailer obviously, but if I built a little hut like this, I think that'd be quite nice. I really like the look of this. I might steal some inspiration from this design. So there we go, that was our visit to the Dorset County Show, September 2025. Just walking back to the car, I found field mushrooms. Unfortunately most of them have been squished by all these cars, but there are one or two decent ones around. Well, there's a few there, enough for mushrooms on toast. And in case you're worried, yes, I am sure what they are. So these are the mushrooms I picked yesterday. So what I'm going to do with these is just slice them up, fry them in a little bit of butter, and have them over some noodles. Normally I would fry them and have mushrooms on toast, because mushrooms on toast is just amazing when it's wild mushrooms, and all of this lovely dark colour will come out in the butter. Or I might have done a mushroom omelette, but I had eggs and toast this morning, so I'm going to have some noodles for lunch. So nice big knob of butter in the pan, and all of those pieces of mushroom will go in there. They're going to shrink down a lot when we cook them. A little bit of black pepper, tiny pinch of salt, and actually also a little splash of water. Because to get the very best flavour out of mushrooms, you need to cook them for long enough. And so these, I'll just poach them lightly in that little bit of water. When that evaporates off, they'll start frying again. But all of this boiling here will extract flavour from the cells of the mushrooms. It gives the cells time to burst, and the flavour, which is amino acids and stuff, to come out of the broken cells of the fungus. So, just instant noodles. Just beautiful wild mushrooms fried in a bit of butter, salt, black pepper. Not by any means gourmet food. However, it's not trying to be anything other than what it is. The intense mushroominess of even just field mushrooms is always almost surprising. And it is just mushroom flavour, but there's just so much of it. You can't beat the flavour of wild mushrooms. I can't remember the last time we had a year this good for sweet chestnuts. These are some really, really plump chestnuts. We've just been out for a little walk. It's nearly the end of October, and so we're just overlapping between the time when it's good to pick chestnuts. I mean, you can always find them if you rummage around in the leaf litter, but this time of year is when they're really at their best. So it's just about an overlap between this time, when it's really good to pick chestnuts, and when we're just starting to light the fire in the evening. So we're going to roast some chestnuts on top of the fire today. Some of these have actually split on their own, and I think that is because we got a bit of late rain. We got a bit of rain just before they fell, and I think they've swelled up and split their own skins. Anyway, so these may not need to pierce. The other ones will need to cut them or pierce them so that they don't go boom. So when I talk about piercing them, I mean, sometimes I might just poke a hole in the side like that. Some people like to cut across in the top by stabbing the knife down like that. It's possibly a recipe for stabbing your own hand. So probably the safest way to do it is to hold them on the board like that, and with the tip of the knife just cut through there and there. This is a very sharp knife, so you've actually cut across in the top of the chestnut. And then we'll stand that up in a pan. And the advantage of crossing them like this is, as they roast, that will open up like a little flower, and we'll get an idea of how well done they are. So there we go, just a little pan, and the rest of these I'll put them out in our unheated utility room, and they'll stand for a few days. Okay, and then that can just go on there. And it will probably take about half an hour, maybe 45 minutes for those to cook. Alright, these are done, and you can actually tell because the skins have gone dull. Yeah, and inside it's just like baked potato, but sweeter. So the other day we were out for a little walk and we stumbled across a walnut tree which had, the shells were open. We'll have a look inside of one of these later. But yeah, so we found some walnuts. We also found some very, very beautiful sweet chestnuts. And I'm going to grow a few of these. Well, I'm going to plant a few of these and hope that they germinate. And hopefully we'll plant them in our own little bit of woodland. The pawpaw trees that I tried growing from seed last year, unfortunately, didn't make it through the winter. So that's obviously not to be. But walnuts and chestnuts, I don't think they're actually either of them native to this land. But they are introduced, and so they're common woodland trees. So perhaps I should feel a bit better about planting these in our woods than American pawpaws, which just definitely aren't naturalised here. And perhaps there's a reason why they're not naturalised here. They're perhaps just not quite right for these conditions. Anyway, we're going to plant some of these today. So I've picked some really nice sound specimens, and I'm going to put them in pots and leave them outside so that they can get a chill over winter, because that's what they need to break dormancy. I haven't quite got enough pots, so I think I'll do 3 walnuts, 3 chestnuts. So we'll start off with a bit of compost in each one, just so that when the roots go down there's something to get into. Like that. And then, so that the nuts don't rot, I'll put a layer of, this is horticultural grit. I'll put a layer of that in each pot. That will just help to keep the bottom of each nut dry. That will stop it sitting in a little pool of water, and that will hopefully stop them from rotting. So we'll do 3 pots of chestnuts. I might just go and get another couple of chestnuts and put 2 in each pot, actually. That makes sense, doesn't it? Because then if one of them doesn't come up, we can still have the other one. So I'll get 1 more chestnut. Right, so there we go. 2 chestnuts in each pot. I've got 6 walnuts as well. I'll do the same with those. So to fill these pots up, we'll have a mixture of just peat-free potting compost and sharp sand. So just mix that together. I should have used a bigger container, but this will be fine. So there we go, just a mixture of compost and sand, just to cover those up. And again, the sand is just to keep things free draining, so that we don't have water sitting around them, because if they're just sitting in a puddle of water, they'll rot. Something like that. So there we go, that's my chestnut pots. I'll do the same with the walnuts. So the whole thing about walnuts and chestnuts is that this is a delicious fatty parcel of food for squirrels. You might think the tree wouldn't want squirrels to eat the nuts, but actually squirrels and, well, other wild animals as well are tempted by the fat and carbohydrate inside this seed. So they collect them all up, bury them for later consumption, and usually don't return to all of them. So the tree sacrifices some of its seeds in return for a planting service. There we go, so just a bit of sharp sand and compost on the top, like that. And then just to stop that compost getting washed out by raindrops, just a thin layer of horticultural grit on the top. That'll just stop that compost from splashing out of that pot. Okay, so here we go. So those are chestnuts at the back there. And that tag, I'll just push it all the way down into the compost actually so it doesn't get lost. So those 3 are my chestnuts. And these 3 are my walnuts. Now, I can't leave these in the greenhouse because they need to be left out to get cold. So they'll need a period of chilling in the outdoors. Nature will also water them as well because it's going to rain over the winter. So I'm just going to find a place to nestle these pots. I'll probably have to cover them to keep the squirrels out. And hopefully in spring we'll have some seedlings. One way to do this so that we wouldn't have to even think about watering them would be to use clay pots and bury them in the soil, sink them to the soil level. I haven't got enough clay pots for that, so we're going to make do with the plastic ones. If we have a really dry winter, I will have to give these some water. But I'm just going to put them down here. This little gap at the front of the greenhouse. I'm just going to line up all my pots down here, and then we'll leave them there until spring. Alright, so those are just going to sit down there, and as a slight deterrent against the squirrels, it doesn't have to be much. I'm just going to put a piece of mesh across there like that, and I'll weigh it down with a brick at each end. That will not exclude the most determined of squirrels. It might just be enough of an inconvenience to make them go and look elsewhere, like the bird table. So I've just given them a little splash of water because everything that went in those pots was really dry. So I've just given them a tiny splash of water just to stop the compost from dehydrating those nuts too much. So now I'm just going to leave them. We'll keep an eye on them, and in the springtime, or at any point where we see leaves pressing up against this mesh, I can take the pots out and allow them to grow on a bit. If we do get double germination in each pot, I'll separate them while they're small and put them in individual pots with a longer root run. There are a couple of the walnuts I'm not planting. Can't seem to lay my hands on the nutcracker at the moment. I don't know where it is. It might be packed away with the Christmas stuff. So we'll do this the hard way. Actually, that wasn't that hard. So yeah, just delicious, decent walnuts. I do love a bit of walnut. Now, even if my walnut seedlings do grow and the trees take off, it's possible I will never enjoy the walnuts from them because they'll take probably 6 to 10 years to fruit. However, it's still a good idea to plant them, because if I don't get to eat them, someone else will, even if that someone else is an animal. The other way you can open walnuts without a nutcracker is just press 2 of them together in your hand like this. And the rounded shell of one of them will break the shell of the other. I don't have a solution for how you crack the last one that way. But yeah, they're good walnuts. So worth growing. A few people have asked me about my Moai head that I made. This is made out of a breeze block I made years and years ago. People ask me, how well has the patina developed on it? Well, you can see he's got a magnificent little moss beard there now. So yeah, he's doing okay. This is one of the quinces I didn't use in my quince jelly, partly because it had a bit of damage to it, but also I want to save some seeds from this. So I think we just slice very carefully into this. I'm not going to cut it in half, I'm going to just slice into the flesh of the quince. Slice quince. They dined on mince and slices of quince, which they ate with a runcible spoon, and hand in hand on the edge of the sand, they danced by the light of the moon. So yeah, I didn't want to cut that in half in case I damaged the seeds. Might actually have sliced right through them. But here we go. So how many seeds are we going to get out of here? Not that many, but enough. That's all of them. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seeds. Get those out to the greenhouse. I'm going to plant them. So much as with the chestnuts and the walnuts that I planted, these are going to need to be left to chill over winter. That will break their dormancy, that will help them to germinate. They actually require a period of chilling or else they just won't grow. So again, a bit of compost in the bottom of the pot. Potting compost with sharp sand mixed in, just to give us a really nice free draining gritty compost. The seeds, well, the general rule of thumb for planting seeds is you plant them twice their own depth. So if the seed's like 5 millimeters, you plant them 10 millimeters deep. So I'll try to go for something like that. I need to give these enough depth that they won't be just washed up by raindrops, although we'll do something about that as well. So just space these out in the pot. Actually, that one's just not even viable. That one's, I can see it's just hollow. I'm going to discard that. So we've got 6 seeds in here. We'll have a little bit more of this gritty compost over the top of them, just to cover them up, and top dress with horticultural grit. If it rains really heavily, that will stop the compost from splashing up. That'll stop the seeds from washing up to the surface. So, quince, Japanese quince, obviously, but it is still you can still call that a quince. That needs to go outside and be left to chill over winter, and hopefully we'll see some green shoots come up in the spring. It's time to enter the tomato jungle and pick some of these little currant tomatoes. I'm going to be honest, I don't think I will grow these again. Also, I need to get this Cape gooseberry under control. It's taken over half the greenhouse and it's really not producing very much fruit. I don't think that was a good idea to plant that in here. Anyway, these currant tomatoes. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to grow these again because they've just gone crazy. They've turned into a massive tangle of tomato vines, and it doesn't seem to matter how frequently I pick them. A lot of them just go squashy and they're overripe or rotten before I get to them because they're so small. The ripening cycle is so rapid that they go from slightly underripe to rotten in a matter of about a day. Plus, the plant is just crazily producing side shoots and a tangle of tomato greenery. Now, I've confessed on videos before that my tomato management process is less than rigorous. I don't generally follow the rules very strictly of keeping a single stem and pruning out side shoots and things. I do my best, but usually fail. However, my friend and neighbour who I gave one of these tomato plants to is having the same problems, and he does things by the book. So even if you try to keep this as a single stem plant, it will defeat you. And I think the reason is that this is very much like the wild type tomato. And so it just wants to be a scrambling, climbing bush. Can't complain about the flavour. The little fruits are delicious. Can't complain about the yield because, you know, they produce a lot of tomatoes. But it's difficult to manage, especially in a smaller greenhouse like this one. And actually for a half hour of picking, you still only have a couple of handfuls of tomatoes because they're so fiddly and small. So yeah, I just don't think I will bother growing this variety again. It's been fun, but I think yeah, see, there's one that's not even fully ripe and it's split and started to go off. So yeah, been a fun experiment. Glad I did, but I don't think I'll bother again. So this might actually be the end of the tomatoes. It's nearly the end of September. So this might be the last lot of tomatoes, with one last little courgette that I picked from the vegetable patch and some basil. I'm just going to stew that down and freeze it, and we'll use that as a sauce on top of fish or something like that later. So I found some mushrooms growing on our little patch of woodland, and I think they're bluets. I'm not completely sure, so let's do a spore print today. So they look like bluets. They're growing in the right place for bluets. Bluets are often found in forest floors in amongst dead leaves, so they're in the right place. There are some possible lookalikes. Some of the Cortinarius species look a bit like bluets. One way we can differentiate the two is by doing a spore print. So here's the mushroom. Here it is in close-up, shedding dirt all over my studio table. But we've got very nice, neat and tidy gills underneath. Lilac purple colour, which is consistent with bluets. Blue purple stipe, which again is consistent with bluets. We're going to do a spore print though, because if it's a bluet, the spores will be creamy white to lilac to pale pinky lilac. If it's Cortinarius, it'll be a kind of rusty brown colour. So just to start with, we'll cut off the stipe. One other diagnostic factor with bluets is that they have a sort of perfumed aroma. And I would say that is perfumed. It's slightly fruity. But yeah, perfumed is the right word. And we're going to put this on paper to do a spore print. The trouble is with a spore print is the spores may be white. So if we were just to put it on white paper, we might have trouble distinguishing the spores. Some people use aluminium foil for this. I'm just going to use a piece of black paper, which I've folded in half. And I'll put my mushroom cap half and half on there like that. We'll put a little drop of water on top, just to keep it humid enough for the spores to drop, and then a glass bowl over the top to exclude drafts of air which might blow the spores around. We'll leave that an hour, maybe 2, and then come back and see what we got. Right, an hour has passed. We're going to have a look at that in a minute, but I'm just going to put that aside for one moment while we talk about what's going on here. This is an absolutely superb book. Roger Phillips, rest in peace, one of the best authors on this kind of material. So what's happening here is we've got 2 potential candidates for this fungus. Well, actually, I suppose 3. So 3 being, one of them being the amethyst deceiver. I know it's not that. I'm quite familiar with that fungus, even though it's quite a variable one. It's definitely not that. It's just they're too big. They are too robust to be amethyst deceivers. So the 2 candidates it could be is some kind of Cortinarius or some kind of bluet, probably a wood bluet. So the Cortinarius genus is quite varied, but there are quite a lot of these that have got a purplish stalk, stipe, or look a bit similar to what we've just picked. There's one there. So Cortinarius amoelans, no, I don't know. Anyway, but there's a Cortinarius that is a potential candidate for what we're looking at. Cortinarius tends to have this kind of veil, this kind of webby veil underneath the cap, covering the gills. That's actually called a cortina. That's a curtain. That's where the name of the fungus comes from. But in more developed specimens, that may fall off. So there's another one, Cortinarius sodaginatus. And here's the one that people probably most commonly mistake for bluets, Cortinarius purpurescens. So this is the kind of really important point that a lot of people don't get if they're just starting out foraging. This is why apps don't work. This is why you can't identify fungi conclusively with an app. Because it's not just about what it looks like. It's about where you find it. It's about the smell. It's about what the gills look like underneath. Look at all the information this has got. I'll read the whole thing for Cortinarius purpurescens. Cap 5 to 15 centimeters across, hemispherical, then expanded and often broadly umbonate. So umbo is this bump in the middle. You can see it on that one there. Umbonate means having an umbo. And that's another thing. So an app isn't going to look at 3-4 different specimens and make a judgment on that group of specimens. It's going to try and identify something from one picture. And even humans identifying things from one picture are not 100% reliable. Sometimes something like a picture of chicken in the woods might be really obvious. But with other fungi, it's just not a guarantee that a photograph will necessarily identify it. Anyway, reading on. Margin becoming wavy, tawny buff to dark umber, often violet tinge, streaked or spotted. So that's all of the cap description. Then stem. Interestingly, he calls it stem, not stipe, but there you go. And Roger Phillips is a guy who knows his stuff. Stem, 50 to 120 by 15 to 25 millimeters. So 50 millimeters to 120 millimeters long, 15 to 25 millimeters wide, with a marginate or emarginate bulb. So there might be a bulb on the bottom and there might be a margin between the bulb and the stem. Violaceous, so purplish, sometimes discolouring, pallid near the base. Cortina, purplish, so the cortina is the webby thing, purplish underneath. Flesh, violaceous, becoming deep purple when bruised or cut. Taste, mild. You can taste and then spit out a tiny little bit of any fungus without doing any harm to yourself. Not recommended, but sometimes it is a diagnostic factor that professional mycologists might use. Smell none or very faint but pleasant. Gills purplish violet, then clay buff to cinnamon. Violaceous tinge often persisting, becoming deep purple when bruised. Spore print rust. Spores almond shaped to elliptic, rough. Habitat deciduous and coniferous woods. Season autumn, occasional. Edibility unknown. There are people who have asserted to me that all of the purplish Cortinarius are edible. But those people are strangers on the internet, and I wouldn't necessarily just take their word for it. Some of the other Cortinarius species are deadly poisonous and kill you in particularly nasty ways. It will hurt all the time you're dying. Anyway, so you don't want to make any mistakes with gathering mushrooms. Mistakes between two different edible species, don't cause you any harm. But really, you need to know what you're putting in your mouth. So here's what I think we have. This is wood bluets. My specimens don't look exactly like this. They're a bit more purple on top. So let's read the description. Bearing in mind that the photograph he's got here is the specimens he found on the day he went out to photograph this mushroom. And, a bit of variability, a bit of natural variability might well account for differences between my specimen and this one, and the Cortinarius as well, of course. So wood bluet, cap 6 to 12 centimetres across, flattened convex, becoming depressed and wavy. Bluish lilac at first, then more brownish. So mine is bluish lilac. None of those in this picture are shown as bluish lilac, but apparently that's a thing. Drying paler. Stem 50 to 90 millimetres long by 15 to 25 millimetres wide. Often slightly bulbous at the base. Bluish lilac, fibrillose. Flesh thick, bluish lilac. Taste and smell strongly perfumed. I did notice that that was quite a fragrant mushroom. It was sweetish smelling, fruity and slightly floral. Gills crowded, bluish lilac, fading with age to almost buff. Spore print pale pink. Spores elliptic, minutely spiny. Habitat in woodland, hedgerows and gardens. Season autumn to early winter. Common, edible, excellent. Okay, so the key difference between these two things, I mean, the descriptors are quite good. So we've got that thing where the cap is bluish lilac at first, then more brownish. That's definitely what we saw on the ones outside. So this one's a younger specimen, and the cap is bluish lilac. The older ones were more of a pale brown colour. So I think it's a bluet, but the key distinguishing factor between this and all of the Cortinarius is the spore print. So on this one, the spores are pale pink, and on the Cortinarius, it's rust coloured. So, what do you reckon we've got? I wonder if we've got anything. Now, I picked a youngish specimen that is still developing because I can be reasonably confident that with the cap actually open as it is, this one will still be dropping spores. It won't have grown past the point where it's finished dropping spores. Anyway, enough waffle. Let's have a look and see what we got. Okay, it is pale, but it is definitely not rust coloured. And if you just catch that in the right light, well, it's creamy white where it's deep, but right around the edges here, it's slightly pinkish. So there we go, that's the spore print. And so now I can say with quite some confidence that this is a bluet. It can't be a Cortinarius, or else we'd be looking at a rusty coloured spore print, and that would be much more visible on the white side of the paper. I'll get a close-up picture of that. As to whether I will eat these bluets, unfortunately I probably won't, because look, they're full of maggots. All of this damage here is maggot damage. And you could see that actually when I cut in through the stem. You could actually see all of the holes going up the stem. All of that is, yeah, you can just see one moving there. You can see a little fungus gnat larva wriggling around in there. It wouldn't kill me to eat that, but aesthetically, I'm not fond of eating insect larvae. Not in this context, anyway. But yeah, the mushroom smells fruity. So yeah, definitely a bluet. I'm happy to have these on my property. I will leave them there to drop their spores. We'll have them spread through the woods, hopefully, and we'll see some more of these in future years. And perhaps another time we'll get to pick them without the insect infestation. But I'm not sad about that. I don't mind that we didn't get to pick mushrooms in our own bit of woodland. I'm just happy they're there. And all of these little gnats, these gnat larvae, will become food for some other organism. You know, they'll develop into flies, which will be food for birds or other invertebrates. It's all good. So I'm actually going to place this fungus here, elsewhere in the woods, and just let it drop spores on these dead leaves. There's no guarantee that those spores will do anything, but I'm going to give them a chance to spread. This is a different part of our little woods, and maybe they'll grow there. We know for sure that that mushroom was dropping spores because it did so on the paper. So I'm going to leave it there in amongst all these dead leaves and hopefully it'll thrive here. Welcome to the comment positivity section. This is like the opposite of reacting to hater comments. So I'm just going to pick out some comments that either made me smile, perhaps asked an interesting question, or just contribute to the general positivity of the comments section. This was on the Purple Jam 2 video. I'm starting to detect a slight Dorset lilt to your accent in your videos. Interesting, I have been here a couple of years now, and obviously we're interacting with people with Dorset accents, so it's inevitable that I might pick up some of the mannerisms and a little bit of the accent. Let's have a listen to that bit where maybe I did slip into a Dorset accent. Here it comes. So it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So yeah, I think maybe I did. On the River Dee slow TV video, do slow TV. Slow as in little bitter plums. That would be interesting. I wonder if it's possible to do a time lapse of sloes all the way from blossom time through to the actual fruit ripening. I wonder if it's possible to... I think I'd probably have to grow the sloe bush here and then clamp the branch and put a camera. It's an interesting idea. A time-lapse video that is like months long, condensed into 10 minutes or something. Thank you for the idea. Lots and lots and lots of comments on the surströmming video. The fermented herring in a can. It is really interesting to see how much the perception of this foodstuff has been warped by the internet doing it as a challenge and actually doing it wrong as a challenge. So as I understand it from most of the people who commented who actually know the foodstuff intimately, all of the other videos you might have seen where people are opening a can of stuff and it explodes in their face and inside there is this soupy mess, this soupy grey mess of unrecognisable slop. They're all doing it wrong. The cans are supposed to be refrigerated throughout, and so if you're watching a video of somebody who has had it shipped to the United States, it can't be shipped by air freight, so it's gone by surface method, probably unrefrigerated. It's rotted in the can. So unfortunately, most of the videos you see reviewing this stuff are either doing it wrong or opening a can that has spoiled. And that has really, really skewed people's expectations to the point that they actually were telling me that I was doing it wrong. I think my can was probably a little under fermented, but if you look at the pictures on Wikipedia, what I saw in the can when I opened it was not that different from what I see on the pictures on Wikipedia. And as I say, lots of Swedish people chimed in to say, yeah, no, that's what it's kind of meant to look like. There are hardcore people who deliberately let it go further than that, but I think, as far as I understand it, mainstream sort of appreciation, if there is such a thing, of this food is not terribly dissimilar from what I experienced. Anyway, the comments. Interesting to hear that it's not that bad, but I'll still let you have my share if you like. I'm curious if there was any reaction from Mrs. Shrimp, if she was brave enough to have a taste, or if she noticed the odour followed you back into the house. It is true that once I brought it back indoors, it was considerably more stinky in a confined area. So when I brought the plates in and I brought the rest of the can in to deal with the remaining contents, I froze it, by the way. I'm not convinced that's the right thing to do, but there was more there than I could eat in a sitting. I've put it in a container, it's in the freezer, and at some point I will probably take that out and use it more like fish sauce. Anyway, yeah, Jenny did wrinkle her nose when I brought it back in, and me too. Actually, when I brought it back indoors, it was a bit more smelly in a confined area. It's still very subjective whether you'll find that smell offensive or not. And I would liken that to any kind of strong cheese. So if you open a really mature Stilton cheese and have a good sniff of that, it smells like vomit. Why would you eat that? Well, the answer is because it's delicious. There are many foods like that where they stink, but once you get them past your nose, they're delicious. The first time I ever had what I would think is probably completely authentic Thai food, the smell of the fish sauce in the food was overpowering, and I thought it smelled like the bins around the back of the fishmonger. But the food was delicious. You just have to get it past your nose. Anyway, yes, so Jenny was a little bit more sensitized to it than me, and found it a little bit more of a challenging smell than I did. But like I say, it is very subjective. On the subject of pronunciations, we'll come back to this actually. Don't worry about your pronunciations, they sound great for a non-speaker. I'm just honoured you're trying to want to give our rotten fish a chance. Also, greetings from Sweden. Also, never apologise for not knowing how to pronounce something in a language you don't know. No one is bothered by it. I'm glad you weren't bothered by it, but it's the internet. People decide to be bothered by it. On the subject of pronunciation though, accents and dialects and things like that, it's really difficult actually for me as a person who's going out and trying things from all over the world, from different cultures and different languages, to treat those with sufficient respect. Because, there are so many languages, I can't possibly know them all. And even if I do my research about how something's pronounced, there is a difference between knowing how to pronounce something and actually pronouncing it. By way of analogy, I used to drive a forklift truck. A forklift truck very much like this one, somewhere on screen. A Lancing Bagnall, as it was in those days, electric reach truck. It's been 20, maybe 25 years since I last drove one of those trucks. But the controls are really simple. I'll explain to you now how to drive an electric reach truck. So when you sit in the cockpit of the truck, you're sitting sideways on to the direction of travel. So it's a bit different from a car, but it's only one little difference. Your forks are over there. You're sitting facing the steering wheel, which is here. And it's that way because the foot pedal for driving you along, unlike a car's foot pedal where the accelerator just makes you go whichever way you've shifted the gears, the accelerator pedal was actually in two pieces. So if you tip it one way, you'd go towards the forks. If you tip it the other way, you'd go away from the forks. So different from a car, but it's only one little difference. And there was a brake pedal, and the brake pedal's under your left foot, which is different from a car, but it's only one little difference. The steering wheel, it was quite similar to that of a car, but it has a knob on it. And so you turn it with your left hand because your right hand is operating levers. And so you're steering with your left hand only, or with a knob on the steering wheel. That's different from a car, but it's only one little difference. But the steering, you're steering a set of wheels that are right underneath your seat. And so the motor drive is a pair of wheels that are sat right under you, almost like a caster on an office chair, but motorised. And so if you turn the wheels fully one way and press the right hand accelerator pedal, you'll go that way. If you turn the wheels fully the other way, because the steered driving wheel has 360 degrees of motion, so if you turn it the other way and press the other pedal, you'll also go that way. That's different from a car, but it's only one little difference. And then there are the levers. So the levers, you've got 4 levers. The first one lifts the forks up and down. The second one reaches the forks out, so drives the mast away from the truck, carrying the forks away from you. That's the reach function. The third lever is the tilt. So that tilts the forks back and forth like this. And then the fourth lever was side shift. So you press it that way and the forks move that way. You pull it back and the forks move that way. The side shift and the reach functions of the truck are adaptations for narrow aisles. So because you can then bring the pallet in closer to the turning point of the truck, you can have narrower aisles in a warehouse. And when you have narrower aisles, you get more racking in and more pallet storage in the same space. Oh, there was a handbrake as well, which was very much like a car. In fact, it was identical to that on a car, except it's on your right hand, which is different to a UK car, at least, where the handbrake's on your left hand. So there you go. That's all of the knowledge you need to drive a forklift. That is literally the sum total of the knowledge to operate a forklift. Except, even if I told you all of that, and even if you remembered all of that, I'm pretty sure that if you went and jumped in a forklift and tried to drive it, you'd crash it straight away. Or at least you'd struggle until you got the feel of it. And you wouldn't be competent in driving that forklift until you'd practiced a lot. And it's very much like that with languages. So I can go on Google and I can find out how to pronounce a particular word, and that'll go in my head. But it hasn't gone to my voice box because I haven't had the practice at it. And unfortunately, I just don't have the time to go and practice and practice and practice a word that I may only say once in the course of the video and never say again for the rest of my life, perhaps. This is not a complaint, by the way. This is just an observation that there is a difference between knowing how to pronounce something and actually pronouncing it right. There's a lot more to it than that as well, actually. So it's true that if you don't speak a language, then the unique phonemes of that language are very difficult for you to form in your mouth and throat. Worse than that is that if you don't speak a language, it can actually be really quite difficult to hear those phonemes properly. Because of the way our language perception works, we're just not accustomed to hearing sounds that are outside of our range of normal sounds. And so This is part of the reason why people have trouble reproducing languages without lots and lots of practice. You have to practice listening as much as you do practice talking. Because, yeah, if you don't speak a language, it's not only difficult to say the sounds, it's difficult to hear the sounds in order to reproduce them. Anyway, that's a big sidetrack, and I realise I've got away from the comments. So let's move on. Remember, the can of surströmming should be stored cold, i.e. in the refrigerator. Kill Conserve tells us this fact. So when I had that can delivered, it was shipped overnight from cold storage with a chill pack in it. And it had strict instructions to say, take it out, put it straight in the fridge. And I kept it in the fridge until I was ready to open it and make the video. If you've seen anybody else opening a can of this food and it's exploded in their face and it's horrible goo inside the can, the chances are that that chill chain has been broken at some point and the product's just gone off. So yeah, store between 4 to 6C. I'm sure these are mismanaged a lot. My friend, you need a cheese planer. Ostivel. So yeah, the fact that I tried to slice the cheese with a knife was a point of contention for some people. I've tried using those cheese planers. I did used to have one, but I find for the types of cheese that I commonly eat, mainly very mature cheddar, they don't perform very well because it's too crumbly. And so you try to draw a slice of cheese off and you just end up pulling a chunk off the end of the cheese as the blade gets... in woodwork, we'd call that tear out. But yeah, tear out on the cheese. So you try and plane a slice off the top and it just pulls the corner chunk off the cheese and you end up with a pile of crumbs. So I've tried using those cheese planers. Also, I'm not completely sold on the idea that thinner slices of cheese are better. I like cheese. I can't think of a reason why I'd want to cut it thinner than I do. I wonder, is there anything you don't like? Lol. There are a few things I don't like. Famously on the channel anyway, I can't eat cucumber. At some point, something changed in my perception. And in fact, it was around about the time I drank that white gourd drink. And I'm wondering if that switched on some flavour perception for me for cucurbits in general, although it's not actually cucurbits in general, but cucumber just tastes like stale library books to me. It tastes like the smell of stale library books. I'm not in the habit of tasting library books. But yeah, cucumber just tastes awful and foul and stale to me now. And that's really the main thing that I actually, if I'm going somewhere to eat out and there's a risk they're going to put cucumber in the salad or the garnish, I have to remember to say no cucumber, please, because it will taint the whole plate for me. Very strange, because cucumber, I'd always thought of it as a really mild and nearly flavourless vegetable, but I can't stand it anymore. The only other things I would say I don't like, I've got a reasonable tolerance for chili heat, but it stops at a certain point, and when I stop enjoying things at a certain level of heat. So if I'm going out for a curry, it will be Dansak or Madras maybe, is not my upper limit, but it's the upper comfort limit. Once we step over into Vindaloo, I'm not enjoying it so much anymore. So yeah, really, really hot things. I have just no interest in eating things that are branded as this will cause you pain. You know, all of the scorpion chilies and the ghost peppers and all those sorts of things. I would rather have milder chilies. You know, even Scotch bonnets are quite hot, but I would rather have a milder chili like cayenne pepper, for example, and put more of it in there so you get more of the other flavours in addition to that same level of heat that you might get from putting a tiny bit of ghost pepper in something. So yeah, that's the only things I can really think of that I don't like, is hot spicy food sort of from the Vindaloo upwards. Sometimes it's entertaining to try a little bit of something that's hotter than that, but not a whole plate full. And cucumbers. Apart from that, I'll try almost anything once. There are some foods I'm hoping that I just will never have time to try in my life. There are some things that seem a bit weird and perhaps repulsive to me that maybe I don't want to try. The only one I can really think of is balut, which is a cooked, partially gestated duck egg. So it's got a duck embryo inside of it. Just kind of don't fancy that. You know, if you love that, more power to you. You can have mine. To be fair, that was the least bulged can I've seen a YouTuber eat. I swear most have kept it until it's a bit or a lot off, accidentally or on purpose. There is a point there, actually, that some people might be deliberately letting it spoil in order to make a clicky video, you know, in order to make a sensationalist video about I ate this stinky fish thing. Anyway, really, if you're okay with the smell of durian, you should be okay with this. Durian's another thing I need to try sometime. I'm up for it. Next time I get a chance to try or obtain fresh durian, I will buy one and we'll give it a try and it will be in a video. I'm not promising to like that because it is a very divisive food stuff, but we'll give it a go. I suspect the reputation of the product colours one's experience, and as such you're not the kind of person who allows collective expectations to influence your experience. You are to put it open-minded. Well, thank you, but it is true that the build-up to this conditioned me to behave in ways that I probably wouldn't have done if I'd actually just come to it completely fresh and unknowing. For example, I mean, I did put the gloves on because the outside of the can was stinky, but there was a greater sense of trepidation in the early part of that video than there probably needed to be. And my reactions in that video, some people thought I was making fake reactions there because I reacted very oddly. But actually what you're seeing in that video is my expectations being destroyed in real time, because I expected to open the can and find what I'd seen on other people's videos about it, you know, this awful soup of bones and slop and foulness, and I didn't. And so what you're seeing in that video is me just desperately trying to reevaluate the whole situation in real time, knowing of course there would be no second take for this thing either, because it was, you know, I had 3 cameras running on me for that reason, because I knew there was one shot at getting the first take on this, but the first take inevitably had to include my perceptions being rewritten by experience that was happening to me right there and then. So it was a really interesting thing, and if my face made strange expressions in there, it is because I was battling my own surprise and maybe slight disappointment even, as it was all happening, as it was all playing out. So not related to the video, and I'm sure somebody has said this at some point, but if you want awesome gherkins, check out your local Polish shop. The ones in the white plastic bag are the best in my opinion. Interesting. I do sometimes buy gherkins from the Polish shops, and they are, my experience has been that they are really, really good gherkins, and often they are fermented pickled rather than vinegar pickled. But I'm not sort of buying the ones in a bag. I always buy the ones in a jar, so I will look for the ones in a plastic bag and maybe give them a try. On don't know which video. Hi Mike, I'm not sure if you made it clear. Jackdaws will roost in rooks' nests, but they don't nest in them. Jackdaws raise their young in holes in trees. I didn't know that, actually. This was on a video where I mentioned that the jackdaws had moved into where the rooks moved out of when the rooks went on holiday. The rooks are back now, but I didn't realise the jackdaws are just roosting where in the rookery. I thought they might be just reusing the same nest as the rooks, but apparently not, so I didn't know that, so thank you for that information. On the robot puppy scam video, the fact that people wouldn't believe the puppy robot scam video to the point that they felt it was necessary to try to push you to actually waste money on trying to buy one to prove it, crazy. And honestly, it is a bit frustrating. And I think this is because YouTube has conditioned people to expect, I did this so you don't have to. But there was so much of people saying, how can you say it's a scam unless you actually got scammed? And that's exactly what I'm trying to show people in those videos, is how you can tell it's a scam before you part with your money. Because that's what we need to learn, is not learn how to recognise when you've been scammed. You need to learn to recognise what a scam is before you fork out your cash. And I think this is a bit like people saying, well, how can you say it would hurt to drill a hole in your head unless you've tried it? A ridiculous example, but that's what we need to learn, is how to recognise a scam before it bites you. How to recognise that it will hurt to drill a hole in your head without actually drilling a hole in your head to find out. On the little challenge thing where I used the cake pop maker, the idea that these challenges are not meant to be realistic has never been more clear than in this video. And then somebody else said, in my headcanon, these challenges are what Mr. Shrimp does when Mrs. Shrimp goes off to see her mum and he's bored. Not exactly wrong, that one actually. Sometimes I will schedule those challenge videos for when Jenny goes to visit her mum or is away for the day, just because it means I will have the kitchen completely to myself. I can mess around. You know, I'm not getting anybody's way by tying up the kitchen with all of my nonsense, sometimes quite time-consuming nonsense. Because of the nature of the challenges, I have to fiddle around with things more in those videos than I do otherwise. Has the nettle beer matured stroke changed with time? It looks a bit more carbonated. Would you make it again next year? Well, this is the nettle beer, and it actually has turned into quite a nice beer. The bottle conditioning has worked, and so it's now quite a nice sparkling ale. Got a good bit of bitterness to it. The carbonation brings out the flavours a bit more. It's quite a sour beer, but not in a bad way, and I think that is just the cream of tartar that was in the recipe. And yeah, it's a decent beer, actually. I gave a bottle to some friends and they reviewed it highly. So I'm not sure if I'd make it again next year. I think I probably will try something else next year. Maybe I'll make a different kind of beer. Maybe I'll make ginger beer. Maybe I'll make real beer and try to start from the most basic of ingredients. I've always fancied the idea of just literally getting some barley, maybe even going and gleaning some barley from the edge of a harvested field, malting my own barley, roasting it, making beer completely from scratch. So maybe that's a thing I'll do in a future video. But yeah, I think I would make nettle beer again. I don't tend to do the same thing over and over again because there are so many things to do. I want to be trying a new one. Purple jam being the exception. Actually, purple jam is good enough to repeat indefinitely. And then finally, on my foraging comparison video, just a little bit of a light-hearted ending. Don't know what you found unnatural about the lesser striped hammer stump. And this was where I was walking in the woods and I found a claw hammer jammed into a cut stump of a pine tree. And with a little bit of retrospect, I should have thought to say that could have been a magical hammer that I should have pulled from the stump if I'm to be the rightful king of all the carpenters, or something like that. But yeah, appreciated the hammer stump thing. Anyway, so that's the end of the video. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.